You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next half an hour, we're going to be wading through the shit, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
I'm Dylan.
I'm John.
And I'm Mark.
And as Matt's here, we were able to do that perfectly well without having to, resort to actual alphabets and stuff like that. So last week we recorded a news podcast about all the news that hadn't really been happening because there wasn't any news to report on. And literally within minutes of us turning off the podcast recording, there was some actual news, or rather gossip, a rumour, I suppose, because it's not confirmed. Although I don't think there's really any question that it's true. More of a question is what it's all really about, I suppose. And to that end, I mean, we weren't really going to bring this up until our next recording in the middle of February or whenever, because we kind of missed the news, so we were going to leave it at that. But a rumour came, or a variety of rumours, or a selection of sort of reactions to rumours in a way, turned up on Gallifrey Base, which John noticed, and it felt like actually it might be worth us digging through some of this stuff to talk about what we think about the sort of Millie Gibson situation, because that's what we're talking about. Is Millie Gibson done? What is the exact nature of her being done? And
who's done
what does
it?
that? Well, but what does that mean for Ncuti Gatwa? What does that mean for Doctor Who? And so on and so forth. And to me, the most interesting thing immediately was, because when it came up and we just finished recording, we all said, oh, look what we've just missed. And I think the sort of conclusion we came to was, or maybe she was a one series and done character anyway, like Bill, like Martha, like a few others, because I think the way I phrased it was, she's come in with a definite story, this story about the baby having been left at the church. And that is a story that suggests a definite end point. And if Russell T Davies is telling that story in a season, then it feels like that's a natural stepping off point for that character. And then you bring in another character to do another story or just be a character or whatever. But do you remember back when Clara came aboard with the 11th Doctor and she was this impossible girl character, and it was, there's a story here to be told, and a lot of fans felt that the natural ending for her character would be the name of the Doctor when we find out how it is that she's spread across time and space, and that actually that should have been the end of the story for her character. I don't think that necessarily should be the case, but it can be the case. And I think we probably thought that that might be why Millie Gibson was going, because we got to the end of her natural story. And so her character story was told, her character was done in the series. But then there were a couple of things that felt slightly odd about it. So before I get into what was said on Gallifrey Base, the slightly odd things. One was, if that was a story that was then done, you would expect that to be the end of their first series together, and then she leaves, and then there's a Christmas special to introduce a new character, and then they go forward with the second series. But no, there were quotes from an insider saying they're going to film some extra bits for series 2 to finish telling her story. Well, that sounded weird in and of itself, didn't it? If her story's not finished, then surely the end of her story is already written. You wouldn't have to write the extra bits to finish her story off. So that felt to me a little bit like, well, maybe they finished telling the story about the baby at the church, but now they need to write a few extra bits to get rid of her character. And then it transpired that she's recorded, as I understand it, 3 of the 8 episodes of the second series. So her replacement companion doesn't turn up till the 4th episode of the second series, presumably. And that's how it looks from, I mean, we've not looked at a lot of spoilers from the filming, but that's how it looks. The replacement character, I don't believe, is sharing any screen time with Millie Gibson. So they've recast the companion midway through the second series, rather than had a sort of handing over of the baton across the first couple of episodes or whatever. I don't know, any of the 3 of you, anything that I've said so far not ring true, and any of the 3 of you, anything that I've said so far not ring a few alarm bells as well? Dylan, you go on that.
I'd been wanting to put my hand up there. So right, yes, the Mirror says 3 out of the 8 episodes. It doesn't say the first 3.
No.
So there is a world in which, a la season 4, a la Freema Agyeman, the story is wrapped up at the end of season 1. He has a Christmas special with Nicola Coughlan from Bridgerton and Derry Girls. Comes back, meets a new companion, bumps into Ruby at some point down the line in series 2. That's kind of, I feel like that means that there's always been a plan. Don't panic. That's that version of that story.
Yeah.
I just
And
want to
that's
kind
not
of flag
impossible.
that. Yeah.
There's always a world where this was the plan, and I think we'll know by the storytelling of whether it feels clunky and tagged on when we see it. But there's also a possibility that she is being spun off into something else. It's like launch the new series and then she goes to work for Unit. I know she's a bit young, but if you look at if there is a Unit versus Sea Devils series, look at the lineup of people you've got of cast members, and most of them I think are over 50. It's so you do need something to attract that Disney audience as well, and a younger audience. So there's a world, and we won't know this, where it was always the plan, and actually she shows up a bit in Doctor Who because she works for Unit, and then she's got her own show on BBC One later in the year.
Well, the 2 leads in that could be Ruby and Rose, Rose, couldn't they?
Exactly.
So 2 young, funky, and so the whole cast would be female. In fact, they'd entirely be made up of female Sea Devils as well, so that they could rule out men altogether. And this is
in
how
IKEA.
And this is how Russell T Davies makes up for the fact that the rest of his Doctor Who feels a little male-centric sometimes.
Nick Briggs is in it, right? Playing, what's it called? the Sphinx? Or what's it called? The Blinks? Whatever it is.
Blinks, yeah.
Blinks.
All that testosterone from Nick Briggs.
I mean, that's not impossible, because I think you'd want young leads, wouldn't you? In something sort of Doctor Who. I think that was one of the issues occasionally. I just rewatched Twice Upon a Time with my boy, like this week. And yeah, Twice Upon a Time is very, very, here are 2 blokes in their 60s sort of thing. It's and there's a little bit of that going across the last few years of Doctor Who altogether sometimes. And I can't imagine Russell T Davies doing that.
No.
So I suppose it depends what angle they want to see. For me, I would want the Sea Devils story to be about a bunch of old guys living in a Cornish fishing village where there's a lot of weird shit happening, but I don't think I'm going to get that, am I?
It's not autobiographical from you, JR.
Well, John, what about all the things I said? How does that ring for you? And more particularly, neither of Dylan and Mark have yet said there was this thing about the sort of insider saying they need to write her exit. They need to write extra things to finish telling her story.
Sorry, I've got the thing open right now. Bear with me.
Is it not there?
It's a mirror.
Maybe I read that somewhere else.
Yeah.
It just says... Oh, hang on. In next year's series, her character is expected to appear in just 3 of the 8 episodes, with one of them a standalone story wrapping up Ruby Sunday's journey with the Doctor. Now, that just says journey.
Maybe.
That doesn't say story. So, I mean, there could be...
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I read that.
Could be coming back in the season finale or anything. Yeah. We don't know yet. I mean, the thing is to divorce it from all the more speculative elements of it, because obviously, being Doctor fans, the rumours are she's been sacked, she's done this, done that, and we don't know that. It could just be a kind of standard TV thing. I mean, Dylan will know better than I do from production days, but I've already done Game of Thrones. You could be in from 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock on that. If she's got to do those days regularly, particularly at that age, maybe it's more than she thought she was going to be in on that sort of show. Maybe it's amicable. We don't know. It's not too bad adding up, getting 2 and 2 and adding it to 29 or something.
Well, this goes into the rumours that were posted, so I might as well get into some of that. I'm not going to read it back verbatim. I'm just going to throw out a couple of the things that sort of came up amongst, because I think what happened was this is somebody conflating a bunch of stuff they've read and trying to make sense of it. I don't think any of these rumors came from the actual person who posted them. And one of the things that was suggested here is that Ncuti Gatwa will be leaving as well. Don't know what's going on here.
My girlfriend just came in.
Is she trying to put us off, or are you trying to put us off?
And she got news about Millie Gibson.
Yeah, just breaking.
One of the things that's kind of been suggested amongst this sort of conflation of rumours is that Millie Gibson wasn't getting on with the schedule, and that she had been having confrontations with the crew for one reason or another, and that this guy kind of goes on to say Ncuti Gatwa kind of comes down on her side, and that the two of them have both sort of basically walked out of Doctor Who together. He's going to stay and finish his contract for 2 series, I think it says, and that at the end of 2 series he'll be gone as well. We'll talk about what this means for Disney and for Russell T Davies and for everything else for Bad Wolf in a second. But the idea that she's not been getting on, there's a suggestion that she's been behaving in a diva-ish manner. But she's 18, or was 18 when all this started. And part of also what's been said here is that Ncuti Gatwa, because of his commitments elsewhere, was much later to coming on to start work on Doctor Who than she was. And that for the first couple of weeks or something of the production, everything was basically resting on her shoulders. And she was basically, I guess, kind of having to do basically everything, and they were filming all the stuff with her. So for the first few days, few weeks, month of production, she was basically being run ragged, I think. And so I don't know if any of that is true, can be true. I don't remember from, and we've not followed the sort of set report sort of Twitter threads, so I don't think any of us know for sure. But it doesn't feel necessarily like it has too much of the ring of truth about it.
Well, I think there was definitely a delay in shooting starting, because I remember there was loads of photos of Millie Gibson on location, and then eventually it was like Ncuti Gatwa like arriving in a 4x4 and everything. Hooray! Doctor Who's finally arrived on.
Right,
on
but
set.
I thought that was just a couple of days.
It might well have been, but I feel like it might have been a bit longer than a couple of days.
I feel like it was the first week of the shoot, and if I remember, it's the Christmassy stuff. It's all at night, so you're starting with a couple of maybe it was a week, 2 weeks, whatever, of just Millie having to be the lead of this show, working at night. There was a story that in the papers a while back about how she didn't like night shoots or something like that, which again people said was just taken out of context. But I don't think we'll ever know, or we won't know for a while, if it was the sort of stress of holding the show. But there's certainly, the evidence points towards the fact that she certainly was the only lead cast member on set for a bit.
I think it's just further proof that Russell T Davies has run out of ideas. I mean, putting pressure on somebody to launch a new TV show, not giving them much support, sort of backstage drama. It's all just the same old stuff again. Give me a new backstage drama on Doctor Who, for goodness sake.
Bring back John Barrowman.
Exactly.
And Noel Clarke and Bruno Langley. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think I can understand why it would be a difficult job for her. I don't. Balloons keep going off on my Skype, and I have no idea.
It doesn't show on the video, so
does it not?
No,
You can't
so
see
whoever's doing it, John.
Touched anything?
Okay.
It's not even your birthday, is it?
No, it's definitely not. Where was I? Yeah, so she's shooting for 36 weeks, something like that, 9-10 months, as the co-lead in a TV series, and she's going to be doing 12, 13, 14-hour days, 5 days a week, spending her weekends trying to learn lines because the scripts have come in late or the scripts have changed, as they always do. And I've seen it happen on. I do shows that shoot for 10 weeks and had burnt out the cast star at the end. So I could completely believe that her and Ncuti, especially of a new generation of sort of people in television who they do care more about their well-being, and they aren't afraid to sort of they don't necessarily toe the line and go, oh yeah, we'll just do it because that's what you do. There's actually comes a point where people are starting to say, no, this isn't good for me, for my family life, for my mental health, for my physical health. And so I could well see her going, this is too much for me. Whether it's a blazing row or just going, I can't do this anymore. Who knows?
Fair enough. I suspect as well, there's got to be a degree. So that whole thing about her being by herself at the start, I suspect there's got to be times as well when she's had a week off and he's been filming by himself or for a few days or something. Because that's kind of the nature of, I mean, look at that first episode, Church on Ruby Road. The whole sort of first 10 minutes of that episode is sort of like 7 minutes just of her and then 3 minutes just of him. So it's not like these things aren't just the way the stories are told anyway.
And that
David
3 minutes
Tennant
was filmed later.
Yeah, and David Tennant. Well, yeah, you would. That's how you'd organise the shooting schedule to give somebody some time off while the other one's working, and vice versa. Look at Catherine Tate and David Tennant. They only did 3 episodes, and yet you look at Wild Blue Yonder, and there is a bunch of stuff where it's just Catherine Tate, and there is a bunch of stuff where it's just David Tennant. And it wasn't like they were filming his stuff for half an hour and then her stuff for half an hour and then going back and doing another half an hour with him. She was in for a couple of days by himself. She was in for a couple of days by herself. So part of it is, I think also part of the reporting of this is that somebody is sort of saying, oh, this is a bit weird, when actually, no, it's probably also perfectly normal, a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think Doctor Who fans get obsessed over what was dubbed in the Jodie era as of the chaos in Cardiff, and making television programs is always chaos. Like I've never seen it go, making a film, a television show, anything like that. I've never seen anything go smoothly. Things constantly go wrong, and there are constant problems, and they solve those problems as they go. And if one of them is that your lead actress is too tired, if you can't schedule around it, then there's a conversation to go, oh, well, maybe you don't come back for the next series, and it could have been a very amicable split if indeed it was a split.
Well, then let's bring up something that we mentioned a little bit off air before we started and before Dylan joined us on the call, is that there's also this talk about Millie Gibson going back to Coronation Street, which is sort of like this sort of weird thing that Mark kind of goes back to something Russell T Davies said on a commentary. Is that right?
Well, apparently, so I didn't quite pick up on it the first time, but there's a bit in the commentary on the Church of Ruby Road. I think it's over the titles. And Russell T Davies said, "Oh, look, there's your name on screen. You never got that in Corrie, did you? That little cat and Millie Gibson up on a big screen," and they're like laughing. And he goes, "I'll have a word with him. Next time." And then he's sort of, I didn't hear it the first time, and I had to kind of go back because I can't remember who tweeted it. Said, "Does he not say when you go back?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that at all." I rewound it and then I heard it, but then I don't know if because I was listening for it, I just tricked my brain into hearing it, or if he actually said it.
You've also got to remember that,
and of course, just before you move on, Dylan, and of course that could just be Russell T Davies joking.
Well, yes, exactly, yes.
Of course. I was just going to say on that commentary, they all seem to get on very well, and I know you can put on a certain face, but they've shot a season by that point. Presumably, it's done in the later stages of.
It was November, I think, late November.
Right, exactly. So they've shot a season, and this sort of stuff won't necessarily be like a contractual obligation. So there's a point where they go, "Do you want to do this?" And she can go, "No, I don't want to do with that because I hate Russell T Davies," which clearly isn't the case.
Yeah, you couldn't imagine Eccleston doing an on-screen commentary with RTD in 2005, could you?
Part of the rumour about Ncuti Gatwa is that part of what this rumour says is that he signed up for a single production block and that he'd see how it went and he would agree to stay on or not after that went. And they're saying that single production block was the special and 2 seasons. And people still have this idea that series 1 and series 2 were just filmed as one entire block, but they stopped in July and came back in November. There was a 3-month break between filming series 1 and series 2. It was not filmed sort of all in one go, so that part of the rumor in itself doesn't stand up to any scrutiny.
I also don't believe that you would sign up the lead for your show and not have some sorts of assurances. There's always a certain renegotiation, but the idea that they wouldn't have an option on what if this becomes the biggest show in the world and you lose your lead after 2 seasons, it's like, and I don't think Gatwa was a big enough star. Sex Education had done very well, but a big enough star to have the power to sort of go 2 seasons done sort of contract. Like those stipulations go into much bigger contracts for much bigger artists.
Let's forget it's been done on Doctor Who before that they've got burnt by not having that extension in place for an actor.
Yeah.
Yes. But also, I think what's worth remembering is that interview he did with GQ, was it, where he said he kind of wanted to go on stage, do like a play again after he finished the second series. Now, I think a lot of people are like, well, that means he's leaving. No, it doesn't. It means that they're sort of banking 2 years worth of Doctor Who that they can just kind of put out and give their lead actors some time off, so that if he does want to take up an option, whether that is a contractual thing that has already been put in place or if it's something that he's negotiated, he can absolutely do that. Don't panic, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was done with Tennant to do Hamlet, wasn't it?
Yeah, although he was leaving at that point.
Specials. Yeah, he just had to do the specials, but yeah.
Well, that was his year off with the specials. But I mean, a lot of the time, actors in the 3 months downtime between series will do a play where they'll spend 2 or 3 weeks learning the play, and then they'll do a 2-month run with the play, and then a week off before they come back refreshed for. And this is the thing, and Dylan, you must have experience of this. For actors, because of the nature of the profession, they often will basically work the entire year round, and in place of holidays, they'll, on something like Doctor Who, they'll get like 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off for Christmas, so they will get that time. But in the summer, for example, instead of taking a holiday per se, they'll just do something different. So they'll still be working.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're doing something very different is the break in itself for them. So
Absolutely.
go from TV to theatre and back to TV is almost like that theatre was your holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if we follow Millie Gibson and Ncuti Gatwa on Instagram, you'll see they've both had plenty of holidays over the last few months. But no, I worked with an actor last year, and he was with us from 7 a.m. in the morning until 4 p.m. At 4 p.m. we put him on the back of a motorbike taxi, and he went to the West End and did a show every night. And that was his choice to do that, and because he liked the variety and he wanted to do both jobs.
It's different energies, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's probably not as exhausting as it might sound, because you're using different energies. And so I mean, some people are just programmed that way, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not impossible for an actor to take on another role, because it arrives and they're just like, I'm very excited about this. I could do with a break, but actually it's only a month doing this, so I'm going to jump straight into that, because especially if you've been playing up against monsters and historical figures for 9 months, it's quite nice to suddenly go and do a few months on a soap or whatever.
And the other thing is, there was a lot of talk in this rumour, and we kind of alluded to it just a second ago, about the fact that Ncuti Gatwa might have more power because he was in Barbie, and we kind of alluded to that.
Yeah,
but that's not. So
he wasn't
it's
exactly
a massive.
Big in Barbie, was he?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
it's a massive film, and he has a reasonable enough sized part in it that gives him as an actor a lot of kudos.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was done, and his contract for Doctor Who was, negotiated before Barbie came out, means that actually the fact that the movie went so stratospheric doesn't necessarily give him extra powers, but it just means that he's a good name to have in conjunction. So for somebody like Disney, who have to think about the sort of promotional angles as well, for them, they can promote Doctor Who. The star of Barbie now is Doctor Who. That's something that they can put in the promotion when it comes time to promote this first series. But what I'm saying is that because his negotiations on these contracts will have been secured before then, things like extensions will already be written in. Maybe his agent can say, look, we want more money now that Barbie's gone stratospheric if he's to stay on and do a series 3. But it's not that they're going to walk out because Barbie was so big, because he wasn't the face of Barbie.
No,
so it's a negotiating tool, but it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah. Nobody came out of Barbie going, oh, Ncuti Gatwa was the best thing about it. Just like nobody left The Dark Knight going, oh, Bern Gorman was the best thing in it.
And nobody came out of, and I'm convinced of this, Batman Begins saying Camille Kajuri was the best thing about that, because I am convinced that one of the actors, one of the non-speaking actors in Batman Begins is Camille Kajuri, but I've never been able to find out if that's true. Dylan, I don't want to know either way. I just want to live with that little mystery as a sort of poetic mystery that she did Batman Begins just before she started Doctor Who.
Just to stay on that caveat and that tangent, not caveat. The woman from Human Nature, Family of Blood, is she not in a non-speaking part in The Timeless Child, in the flashback sequence to Brendan? Is his name Brendan? It is Brendan. Yeah.
What the sister?
The sister of mine, I'm 99% sure she's in it, probably playing a different role that was cut. And I don't know, I can't find any evidence of it apart from it looks exactly like her.
Oh, interesting. Maybe.
Anyway, mysteries.
On the subject of Ncuti Gatwa and Barbie, I think it's also worth pointing out that in all his kind of social media responses to the Oscar nominations, it's all been very much kind of congratulations rather than I'm part of this Oscar-nominated team. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think he sees himself as the star of Barbie. So I don't think it's going to hold as much sort of negotiating power as some fans who don't know what they're talking about. I mean, present company excluded, would like to think, you know.
Let's talk about Russell T Davies and that team then, because I think there are two things here. Well, one is part of the rumor that was repeated here is about the nature of sort of Russell T Davies basically getting the old boys back together, Phil Collinson and all the others. Phil Collinson and Murray Gold, I suppose, are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the team that's been reassembled to make this version of Doctor Who. And I think Dylan and I in particular think that showed up on screen. The others perhaps not quite so much. But for me, I think that's probably a bad thing in some ways. So going back to the stuff about was Millie Gibson behaving like a diva, probably not, but probably there was something about the behavior that could be read that way from somebody from the outside. But I wonder if there was a confrontation, if there was something that was going not quite right, if Russell T Davies has got a team together that worked together before, there's a kind of sense where something like that there could be a closing of ranks.
Yeah.
And there's also a sense where something like that, the nature of the team that he has, might not have been best placed to be empathetic towards a situation necessarily. So if you put together the idea that empathy might not necessarily have been flowing as freely as it should, plus there was a closing of the ranks, I wonder if there's a situation where Millie Gibson slightly has been left hang out to dry a bit. And so, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, there may be a clash of work cultures there, but I also think Russell T Davies is smart enough to know that the optics of him having some sort of, as a 60-year-old man, having a 60-year-old white man having a bust up with a young aspiring new talent, a young woman, is not fantastic. So I think I would suggest any sort of thoughts of public arguments are not a pure speculation. And
fanciful would be my
exactly.
It does read a little bit like somebody's just taken a little bottle of Tipp-Ex and removed Christopher Eccleston from that rumor about them having like a full-scale fight in a car park or something.
Yeah.
And they just Tipp-Ex'd out his name and then just wrote Millie Gibson. Because I think everything that Russell T has done in New Doctor Who and has said about kind of the world has changed, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do this. Now, don't get me wrong, people who do that can often turn out to just be talking out of their arse and can be quite horrible people. But it does also show that he's very savvy, and you're absolutely right. I don't think he's going around, storming around set, yelling at 18-year-old girls. It just doesn't quite sit right.
He might have a bitch about it on the phone to Phil Collinson afterwards, but you know, I'm sure he's a smart enough individual not to treat people badly and treat them with the respect that you would hope everybody deserves.
Having
How
said
often,
that,
how often is Russell on set?
Yeah.
well,
that's
this
the
is
other-
it. But
Yeah.
he must be a little bit, but perhaps not as much as we expect. But
I
now that
have a
he's living
feeling that-
back in Swansea, he's probably there more than he was before when he was in
Yeah.
Manchester.
That's what I was going to say. And I think also, I feel like he's on set a lot more than Moffat and Chibnall were, because I think you look at Russell T Davies Doctor Who and it's his influence stamped
His
all
voice,
over it. The
yeah.
way
Yeah.
it looks, the way it's scored, it's a Russell T Davies production. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on set a lot more than last time.
Also,
Russell Vision.
yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
it. But also, I think Russell T Davies is extremely ego-driven and very bloody-minded. And I think if somebody upsets him, I think there's every chance that Russell T Davies is the kind of person who maybe holds a grudge, is perhaps the wrong way of putting it. But I think if somebody upsets him on set, then they're probably not turning up for work, a few weeks later at the so if there was a falling out, I 100% believe that Russell T Davies would have said, yeah, I'm writing you out.
Yeah, I can see that, but I also think it will have been handled in a lot more of a professional way than perhaps
Yeah.
these stories have led people to believe.
So then the other thing is Disney and Bad Wolf. The rumor goes on about Disney being upset that they're losing their leading man 2 years in, which I don't know. I think that's for the birds at the moment. I suppose it might turn out to be true, and we'll never know. There were lots of rumors very early that Ncuti Gatwa was going to be 2 series and done anyway. So even if he does leave at the end of the 2nd series, that could always have been the plan.
Yeah.
And I don't suppose we'll ever really know, unless it's really obvious when he goes that he wasn't due to go at that point. But I think even Christopher Eccleston, I think it looked like a really natural point for him to go because it felt like the end of the story. So it might be that we never do know. But on that front, they also this person, Passenger, also talks about Russell T Davies having this 5-year deal. And part of the rumor is Disney want to get rid of him early, and Bad Wolf are looking at getting somebody else in as a replacement,
No
and
chance
already looking for the
whatsoever.
replacement.
No.
The point is, Bad Wolf and Russell T Davies are kind of, old friends. None of that rings quite true.
The part that rings true for me, sorry to jump in, is just I think they are looking for Russell's replacement, and I think they have been since the start. And maybe that because they need a safe pair of hands to hand the show over to. So I think part of this plan has always been in that 5 years to find perhaps multiple people that could run the show in his absence.
Well, and I go back to what I say is I don't think he'll write 5 series, do 5 years. I think he does a bit and then steps upstairs and somebody else comes in. Yeah. And John, you repeated the rumor for us in our thread on WhatsApp, but I went back to Gallifrey Base to read some of the follow-up, and what you missed was Passenger carries on to say in a post like 20 minutes later, quote, Bad Wolf looking at the people the Loki writer Kate Herron and her partner on that episode that's in series 1 as being Russell T Davies's replacements.
Well, yeah,
to me that rings
that
true.
could just come out as that they're the only writers that have been announced officially for new series.
But also, that's a bit like Stephen Moffat when they announced fairly early that he was writing for Series 4 and then that he was taking over. I think what happens, and I've suggested this about these exact people as well, like months and months and months ago. And to me, this just still rings true and looks even more likely than ever to happen. Russell T Davies writes 2 series with Ncuti Gatwa or 3 series with Ncuti Gatwa. Then Ncuti Gatwa moves out, Russell T Davies steps upstairs, Kate Herron and her writing partner, come in, cast their own Doctor, and they carry on writing Doctor Who in a Russell T Davies mould, but with enough of their own personality, and they become the sort of on-the-floor showrunners, while Russell T Davies is still at the top, pulling some of the strings.
Yeah, I agree. And it's Russell isn't getting any younger. He might have a contract for 10 years being an executive producer. That's a lovely pension for him and a part-time job.
Exactly. That's exactly what I think he does. And I think, to me, that also allows him to write the first episode of the Sea Devils story and then hand the other 4 episodes over to somebody else.
In a tortured way, because that worked really well.
But it did. But John, you're sarcastic. But Torchwood's viewing figures went up in every year of the 4 years it was on telly, and it got promoted in the television
because it got
hierarchy.
promoted every year.
It went from
It's like
BBC Three to BBC Two to BBC One to America.
Yeah.
When you hear about Torchwood Series 1, I'm just more and more impressed they made anything, because they had half the money and half the time and still managed to bang out 13 episodes.
And Chris Chibnall was not the showrunner on that
No.
series. He was not intended to be the showrunner. He became the showrunner because they didn't have a showrunner.
But this sort of goes back to what we were saying about the workload on Millie Gibson. Torchwood is an ensemble show, so you can have an episode about Jack and an episode about Yanto somewhere else, and they could be shooting at the same time or at least overlapping. And the focus isn't all on those two leads; it's on 5 different characters who each, in all of those series, get their own episode that really focuses on them. So that's when people talk about the workload and the schedule. Obviously, she had a big workload on Coronation Street, but they're filming multiple storylines, multiple characters, and multiple episodes at the same time. And so she might be in for 2 weeks and then have a week off and then back for another week or whatever.
Right. Anything more from anybody else? Because I feel like we've talked through as much of this stuff as we really needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just on the subject of the, all they're looking for is replacement. I hope they are, not because I want rid of him, but I think, there was certainly a thing with where it was like, well, it's obviously Moffat, and then when it was Moffat, it was like, oh, well, it's obviously these people, but they kind of messed all that up, so it's just like, oh, well, we'll give it to Chris Chibnall. I think there needs to be kind of some if Doctor Who's to go forward for like another 60 years or whatever, I think they do need to be kind of looking at the future. But what I would say about that thing is it's very much that rumour is baked in kind of culture war dog whistling. In fact, it's not even dog whistling, it's like outright, oh, they're not very happy with Russell T Davies for virtue signalling in the commentaries, and like that to me means this is nonsense. This is just somebody playing to that kind of culture war crowd. It's not,
Like Disney took on, I think we said, the governor of Florida. They ain't going to be too bothered about Russell T Davies here.
Well, quite. Doctor Who's pretty small fry for Disney, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And I imagine.
I think, go on, Tim.
I was just going to say, I imagine it's one of their cheaper properties that they're going to have sizzling away in the background rather than their big new Marvel or Star Wars show.
Yeah, and I think the management's changed at Disney since the deal was done as well, so they're not going to particularly be paying that much attention. The only evidence we got on Disney Influence is there was a note in episode 1.
Yeah.
We don't know anything more than that.
Which actually gave episode 1 its best scene, but never mind.
Yeah. It's almost like Disney do know what they're doing.
As it.
And curiously,
the weaponized entertainment, I think, is the phrase I heard.
The new companion as well, whose name is Fashta. No, that's not right. Farada Sethu. Hasn't she come hot from one of the? Yeah. So there you go. So there's a Disney connection there too. And actually, unless I'm mistaken, I read somewhere she's actually older than Shuji Gatwa.
She is.
So he's 30, she's 32 or something.
Yeah. That's going to be an interesting dynamic.
I quite like. I mean, not that I'm here to say, oh, I want to see the back of Millie Gibson, but seeing someone new in Doctor Who is always fascinating, isn't it? So that is definitely something to look forward to.
It's just weird we're seeing it right now when we should be like prepping to,
Well, I think that is the problem with filming Doctor Who so far ahead, isn't it? In the first Russell T Davies era, they would start production in July, which was as the previous series just finished broadcasting. You'd start production on the next one. Now, and this has nothing to do with Doctor Who, people keep thinking, oh, for some reason they're filming Doctor Who way far ahead and trying to come up with theories as to why they're filming Doctor Who way far ahead. It's Bad Wolf. They did exactly the same thing with
His Dark Materials.
Pullman, His Dark Materials. They did exactly the same thing with that. They were filming like 12 months ahead of broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, from a TV perspective, it makes sense. You get as much material done as early as possible. Therefore, there's less to go wrong down the line, particularly with something like Doctor Who, which is going to be a treadmill.
Yeah, for sure.
You get ahead to start with.
Anyway, to wrap up, just to change the subject absolutely entirely, but speaking of things that are about to happen, so Apple TV Plus is about to start broadcasting Peter Harness's new series, Constellation, which sounds absolutely fascinating. Do we know the premise?
No.
No.
So I'm going to repeat the premise for you, but for anybody else listening, and this is by way of saying I still want Peter Harness to come back and be one of the showrunners on Doctor Who or something tangentially involved in Doctor Who. It's about there's a disaster on the space station. Only one pilot comes back alive. And when she gets back to Earth, everything there is just slightly different.
Oh. Sounds exciting.
A sound of thunder, possibly an influence, and then Peter Harness takes over and does it in his own way. It sounds great.
If you want Peter Harness to come back, just have a word with Emily Cook, because she seems to have some kind of magic power with Doctor Who, so I'm sure you can make it happen.
Emily Cook's one of the script editors on Constellation.
Exactly, so just have a word,
Right, on that note, until we find out what the news was while we were talking in about an hour's time and come back and record again this evening.
You're not going to believe
guys, you never
God.
I was JR.
I was Dylan.
I was John.
And I was Mark. And
we will speak again soon. Very, very soon.
Michael Fassbender's playing the Borat.
I stopped it, Mark. I'm afraid.
Well, it's an audio extra.
Yeah, maybe it is.
I can't remember